Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Grass and Roots podcast. Today's episode is going to be a little different because I don't have a guest today. It's just me. I want to talk about the upcoming election in Louisiana on March 29th. We'll be voting on 4 different amendments, and I'm going to talk about why I think we should all be voting no on all 4 amendments. If you're not from Louisiana, of course, you can still listen to this episode, but that is primarily what I want this episode to be about, and that's what I'm going to focus on. I'll start by saying, I'm not at all an expert in any of this, in elections or voting, or even on these amendments that we've been voting on. And when I first, I've been learning more about these amendments and this election because I'm trying to be a civically, politically engaged person. And I think it's important to vote, especially locally. So I've been learning more and more, and I just felt like it was really important to talk about to a larger audience, which is why I'm talking about it here too. And I thought about maybe getting a guest on to talk with me about this election and these amendments and everything, like more of an expert, if you will. But honestly, I think maybe it's good that it's just me and I don't have, someone who knows more on this talking about it, because I think I know it, as long as I know if I'm talking about this, nothing is going to go over anyone's head, because if I'm talking about it, it's not anything that extravagant, because I'm just learning this along with everybody else. And I think the point of breaking a lot of this down, I really want to just explain my understanding of these amendments. So I'm going to focus on, my own perspective and understanding, because I am just an average American citizen, an average Louisiana resident. And I don't think we don't have to be experts. I don't know. I think sometimes in politics, it can feel like we have to be an expert on something in order to care about it or know about it or whatever. I don't know if this is just politics. Maybe I feel like this permeates in other aspects of our culture in general. But I do think there is this element of, with voting specifically, on well, I don't really know what we're voting on, so I'm not going to do it, or I'm not going to learn about it. And it feels really overwhelming and confusing and all that stuff. And I don't want this episode to be overwhelming or confusing. If anything, I want you to think, what is Toree saying? I need to just look this up for myself, and you can go read it. Or you could think, oh, okay, the way that I'm hearing it here, maybe I get a little more, and I'll go read more about it. I'll share all of the resources with all of you also in the descriptions and everything. So if there's anything you want to, learn more about or read more about, I'll share all of that with you, because please feel free to do that. Again, not an expert at all. So that is the plan for today's episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoy. After this, we will go back to guest episodes for the most part. But I did just want to talk about this and share it, because I do think it's important. And definitely go vote if you are in Louisiana on March 29th in the upcoming election. Early voting starts tomorrow on Saturday, the 15th, and goes until the 22nd, I'm pretty sure. And then the election is on the 29th. If you're not in Louisiana, still go vote in your local elections. Okay, can I also really quick shout out just my favorite voting tool that I use? And other people in Louisiana and people in other states, I'm sure, have some version of this. In Louisiana, I'm sure there are people, the viewers, know what this app is and already use it. But I feel like when I tell my friends about it and family, they've never heard of it. They don't know it. So I actually need to shout this out if no one knows. This is so stupid. If nobody knows about the Go Vote app, GEAUX. Do y'all know about this? Do y'all know about this app or no? You can look at what's on your ballot, your voting location. You can request an absentee ballot. You can change your voter information. So if you change addresses or whatever, the election calendar's there, and you can just check. If you go to your profile, it'll tell you if you're an active voter. It'll tell you when your next election is. The whole thing. It's so nice. It's so nice and helpful. Even just being able to go on and know when, it'll show you your ballot, the election date. You can just know if you're not sure when elections are, especially if you're in a state like Louisiana where we have a lot of elections. If you don't know where they are or when they are is the bigger thing. You can always look on your app and know. So I know there's an election in another part of Louisiana in February, but that wasn't in my district. So if I was confused and I'm like, well, am I voting in that election? I don't know. I just go to this app and it tells me when my next one is. Isn't that so great? So I had to shout this out really fast. Maybe everyone listening is like, yeah, we've been using GoVote. But if anyone has never heard of it or is not using it, you should definitely use it because it's very helpful. So just wanted to take a second to say that. Okay, let's get into the amendments now. Okay, for the people watching on YouTube, I am looking down a lot. I'm looking at my notes, I'm saying that in case it's like off-putting that I'm looking down the whole time. Also, I should start, these are amendments to the Louisiana Constitution. There is a lot of background on our governor wanting to have a constitutional convention and change the Constitution. I could talk more about that. I don't know. Maybe I'll decide to talk more about that later. But for now, I just kind of want to focus on these and on what is on the election. Maybe at the end, I'll go back and talk a little bit more about that part of the conversation because it is relevant, of course. But I just want to go straight into the amendments first and talk about them. Like I said, I'm voting no on all of these amendments. There's a no to them all, y'all campaign happening right now. I'll put all the resources below, like I said, and all those different organizations that are working to, do outreach on this. But I just want to say that again up front. Voice of the Experience, they're an organization in Louisiana. They have a really great section on their website with all of the amendments. So I'm going to just read the language from the amendments there and read a few of their bullet points on the issues with the amendments, and then I'm also going to put it into my own words. I just think that's going to be the easiest way to navigate the conversation. And there's a few other organizations that I think have great language on this stuff, and they have experts on this that have worked on it, and I'll also talk more about that. But just getting straight into it, Amendment 1 is about specialty courts. So the language on the ballot is, do you support an amendment granting the Louisiana Supreme Court jurisdiction to discipline out-of-state lawyers for unethical legal practices in the state of Louisiana and to grant the legislature the authority to establish trial courts of limited and specialized jurisdiction? So there are two parts of this amendment, which is kind of the first issue, right? You should vote on one. Why are you voting on two things in one? You know what I'm saying? But I want to focus on the specialty courts. That is the biggest issue, in my opinion, and also was something that when I would hear people talking about this amendment, that was the thing that clicked for me on why this is just not something that I would vote for. So I want to read two of these bullets from Voice of the Experienced, just because I think they put into words what I'm meaning by the issues with the specialty courts. So unchecked legislative power. It hands the Louisiana legislature the ability to create unlimited specialized courts with no clear oversight or voter accountability. So that is huge. That's the first one that's huge, where you're taking so much power out of the people that you're locally electing. The example, I was at a community event the other day where they were talking about this, and someone gave an example of if there's a specialty court for whatever, right? And it's in Baton Rouge. If someone's all the way somewhere else in the state, hours away, they have to go all the way to a specialty court in an area they're not from, people they didn't elect, instead of being in their own district where the people that they elected are accountable to them and to the community, right? That's crazy that you know what I mean? You could make courts for anything and people would just have to go, and it's not people that you're voting for. So then what is the point? Do you know what I mean? That is crazy. Also, parallel politicized courts. These courts could be used to serve political agendas, for example, abortion courts, immigrant courts, conviction integrity courts, or anything. We don't know because they don't specify. Another huge issue. There's no specifics on what courts that they want to create. No one is saying what court they even want. They're not saying it. I feel so out of my depth talking about it, but I do care, so I feel like it's fine. And then one other bullet too I want to just go ahead and read, because I do think, again, it kind of goes along with what I'm saying, is the threat to judicial fairness could drain resources from existing courts, worsening delays and inefficiencies. Again, it's just this centralizing of power. I don't even know if that's the right phrase for what I'm thinking, but I think that for me is when I heard someone saying it in that way, I was just so shocked, and like it's a very scary First Amendment. You know, judges and the court system already is so intense just with the term lengths and everything. So to continue to give the government more power, and I actually should have started with this. The Constitution and constitutional amendments are supposed to protect people. Like, that's the point. It's for the people in whatever given area, country, state. So for these amendments, and starting with the first one, for the only thing it does is take power from the people, take power away from our vote, and give it to the government. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned and confused. I'm concerned and confused. I'm going to read an excerpt from this article in The Lens. It's written by Bruce Riley, who is from Voice of the Experience. So I'm just reading an excerpt about this First Amendment. Okay. One proposal, Amendment 1 on the ballot, allows for the legislature to create new specialty courts outside the jurisdiction of the district court structure, using appointed magistrates and newly created procedures. If this passes, every potential probation violation could go to a specialty court. They could also be destinations for every post-conviction writ for people who have been sentenced but who have claims of actual innocence, ineffective counsel, or judicial and prosecutorial misconduct. With specialty created court rules and a prejudicial standard of proof, such as reasonably satisfied, Landry's magistrates, Governor Landry, if you don't know, magistrates and Attorney General Liz Murrell's prosecutors could bypass the democratic process of locally elected judges and district attorneys who are accountable to the community. And then not long ago, news reports revealed that one of Louisiana's appellate courts had systematically denied more than 5,000 petitions claiming wrongful convictions, something so common it didn't even merit a scandal. I actually read that that article about that situation. It was so heartbreaking and insane. That's an aside, but that was crazy, of one of these courts just not being accountable at all and nothing happening to anyone involved, of course. But anyway, I wanted to read that excerpt because I think, again, it puts into words what I'm saying, and I feel like it helps me to not ramble too much when I have something to read that, you know, goes along with what I'm saying. So I don't know if there's that much more to say on it. There is definitely political concern with this when, again, you could just create a court for anything, especially we have a far right administration statewide and also federally. So who knows what type of courts would actually be created. But even beyond that, just this idea, again, of taking power away from locally elected judges and people that are already in the system, and puts it into some people that don't have to be elected. They can just be appointed. So that is a very concerning First Amendment. I feel like it was one that I didn't fully grasp it or understand it. Sometimes it takes a second of reading a lot of, and that's the other thing. And I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but it is so frustrating how confusing and just overwhelming a lot of this stuff is. It took me so long to understand what a lot of this stuff even meant. And I consume a lot of this all the time because I care about it and I'm just interested. It's a lot. It takes a lot of effort to be aware, which I just think is so unfortunate and intentional, right? It's easier for people in power when we don't know. And when it's just difficult to know. But all that to say, the First Amendment, I feel like, was one that I didn't fully get it. And I didn't really think about it. I was like, okay, specialty courts, whatever. I don't even really know what that is. I don't care. But it actually is very, very concerning. It's just concerning because it's, you know, that is what we have as citizens, is that power, and to see the government already putting in effort to take that away. I guess I shouldn't say already. They always have done this, but that's a concern. So that's the First Amendment. That's the specialty courts. I hope this was somewhat easy to understand. Again, if you want to learn more, I will put this article from The Lens in the bottom. I'll separate it. I'll make it look really nice and fancy in the description. You'll be able to read everything and see everything for yourself, but that is the gist of that. Okay, so Amendment 2 is the most complicated, complex, to me personally a little confusing, so I'm going to get into that, but I'm going to first read, same thing, Voice of the Experience. I'm going to read their excerpt, and then I'm going to talk a lot about that, and I'll get into the details, but I'm going to start with reading this. Amendment 2, tax cuts for the rich, higher costs for the rest of us, which of course just sounds amazing right off the bat. So the language on the ballot is as follows. Do you support an amendment to revise Article 7 of the Constitution of Louisiana, including revisions to lower the maximum rate of income tax, increase income tax deductions for citizens over 65, provide for a government growth limit, modify operation of certain constitutional funds, provide for property tax exemptions, retaining the homestead exemption and exemption for religious organizations, provide a permanent teacher salary increase by requiring a surplus payment to teacher retirement debt, and make other modifications. I love that make other modifications at the bottom. Like, I love that. Just whatever those other modifications are. We can just do whatever. I love that. That's so funny to me. I love make other. Okay. So that one already is very long. And I will say, because I've heard people talk about this, the bill is, or the amendment is 115 pages. And then on the ballot is 90 something words. So important context of how much information you're actually getting from the language on the ballot compared to what it actually looks like, and what there's so like the and other modifications is so many other things that you can go and read, right? But that the average person is not getting the full insight just based on that. Definitely not if you're just showing up to the voting booth, So I'm gonna read this. This is in the language of Voice of the Experience. I'm gonna read this first. This amendment is packed with misleading, vague language, so much that it is facing lawsuits. And actually, a few of the amendments are facing lawsuits. I think 1, 2, and 3 are. I don't know as much about the lawsuits, so I'm not gonna necessarily get into that. But if you are curious, definitely look it up. There are lawsuits out there. It claims a permanent teacher salary increase, while in reality redirecting education dollars to pension debt while cutting income taxes for the wealthy. Some teachers may even face a pay cut. This giveaway to the rich will drain state revenue, likely leading to higher sales taxes and new taxes on essentials. So the two big things that I'm going to focus on with this amendment, and I think that's what most people are focusing on too when I hear them talk about this, taxes, of course, this is mostly a tax amendment, and then also the teacher pay, because obviously who doesn't want teachers to make more money? But the fact that this actually does not even guarantee that, and like it said, some people could even get a cut. Like, there's no guaranteed pay raise. So those are the two things that I want to just talk about a bit. I feel out of my depth with all of these, but I feel very out of my depth with this one. So I want to use this fact sheet from Invest in Louisiana. They've done such an amazing job. They do an amazing job in general, but they've done such an amazing job with education on Amendment 2 specifically, and talking about the tax situation. They made a really great fact sheet. They have a lot of information about Amendment 2, but the fact sheet I'm going to kind of use to help guide the conversation so I can make sure I get my point across on why I think we should vote no on number 2. So I want to actually read this first paragraph on this fact sheet because I do think it's important. So in November 2024, at Governor Landry's request, the Louisiana legislature cut out state income taxes for individuals and corporations, eliminated a tax that is mainly paid by large, profitable corporations, and raised the state's sales tax so that Louisianans now pay the highest sales tax rate in the country. These changes left the state with fewer resources for programs and services and cemented a regressive state tax structure where people with low and moderate incomes pay a higher effective tax rate than the wealthy. During that November session, legislators also approved a 115-page bill, what I was saying earlier, that rewrites the section of the state constitution that governs taxes and spending. These changes require voter approval in a statewide election on March 29th, where it will appear on the ballot as Amendment 2. So I think that's in better words that I could put it in, but I think that's important to understand because I think a lot of Amendment 2, the way that I understand it and the way that I've heard it is it almost is just, it kind of cements our current regressive tax structure in Louisiana. So we already are having these issues with the wealthy having these tax cuts and the working class paying paying more than the wealthy. So, and having the highest sales tax rate in the country, like we already are dealing with those things. So Amendment 2 is there are new bad things in it, of course, but a big issue with it is it just cements that into place, which is obviously not good. So if we're still confused, if we're still lost and confused, that's okay. Specifically, Amendment 2 would create an artificial growth limit that restricts what legislators can budget for each year for ongoing programs. This could force the state to cut funding for the day-to-day operation of the state government, such as public schools, healthcare services, and other programs that support families and communities, even when it's available to spend. So, in my own words, from what I understand, and I've tried to learn specifically about this growth limit, because for some reason there's parts of it that just are not clicking. And I think maybe just because it's an artificial growth limit, like there's no reason for it. So it makes it harder to understand because there's just no reason. But it creates exactly like it says, an artificial, just a fake growth limit to dictate when the government can spend money on public goods, on anything, but on public goods, like it says, healthcare and public schools, even when the money is available. So the money could be available, but this amendment would stop legislators from being able to spend money on public needs even when it's there. Sorry, I'm laughing. It's just like, I think it doesn't click. So I'm just like, why? It doesn't click because why? And the way that I've heard people put it too is if there are if there are healthcare cuts on the federal level, but on statewide level, Louisiana's like, well, we don't want to cut healthcare or do this or that. Even if legislators wanted to invest into healthcare because there are cuts federally, they couldn't even do that because of this artificial growth limit. Okay, second thing, specifically Amendment 2 would raid and or eliminate state savings accounts, including a rainy day fund that voters set up a few years ago to fund transportation projects, and 2 education trust funds that help pay for early childhood education, K-12 schools, and research at our public universities. So again, taking money out of public needs and goods. I mean, I guess all of it kind of goes together where it's all of this is taking money and power away from local communities. And then lastly, and I think this is a good, ending on what I had just said, it will take power away from ordinary people who voted to protect important funding streams from politicians and give more control to the legislature. So it's like what I said earlier, the point of these amendments should be to protect people and to help people, but it's just simply not. I want to talk more specifically about the teacher pay raise conversation also, and I want to give more detail because I feel like earlier I just said it doesn't actually guarantee a pay raise. So I want to talk about that a little bit more specifically just to explain why that's the case. So I'm going to read this excerpt. This is also from Invest in Louisiana. Something they put out. It says, Amendment 2 does not provide a permanent teacher pay raise. Amendment 2 on the March 29th ballot contains misleading language through its 91 words. The most glaring misconception involves the prospect of permanent pay raise for teachers and school support workers. The raise is actually just replacing a stipend that public school teachers are already getting. So teachers' overall take-home pay will not change under the amendment. The proposal will also eliminate 3 state trust funds and a protective source of revenue for education programs. So the amendment, like we just said earlier, is taking money out of public school education, specifically early childhood education, because of the elimination of those savings accounts, and also will control whether or not legislators actually can put money back into the public school if they wanted to because of the artificial growth limit. Even if the money is there, they just couldn't invest in it. Okay, I want to read a little bit more. I'm sorry I'm spending a lot of this episode reading, but I'm trying to read and then put it in my own words. I want to talk a little bit more about the growth limit because I'm not sure I'm explaining it to the best of my ability, or I'm not sure if the best of my ability is the best. A government growth limit is predicated on the belief that the current state budget is adequate and the needs of the state's citizens are being met. That status quo spending levels need only to be maintained to ensure all the state's citizens have the support they need to thrive. That is not the case in Louisiana. Lawmakers must have the ability to make sound decisions based on the needs of the moment and the resources at hand. Further, the growth limit as proposed in Amendment 2 would prevent those lawmakers from making the transformational investments in our state needed to address the chronically unmet needs of our citizens. So I think that is helpful too, to think about suggesting a growth limit in general assumes that all of our needs are being taken care of as citizens right now, right? That's the only right way you would have some sort of growth limit. If it's like, hey, we don't actually need to keep investing money into this or that, everyone's good, we're good, let's put a limit on how much we can actually invest, right, within a certain period of time. But that's not the reality. Like, we are not all fine and good and taken care of and it's easy. There are still projects that need funding, and there are projects that are going to continue need funding, and lawmakers should have the power to be flexible in what can be invested in and what can't be invested in. I think my concern too, just thinking about this and listening to it, and I'm sure I could ask someone who knows more than me to answer this question, but I think about, like climate resilience, or not in climate resilience, disaster recovery. If there was a storm and say we already hit the limit of how much money we can invest, is the disaster recovery, is that considered a one-time fee? Because you can, if you go over the limit, the money can be spent, but only on non-recurring things. So does that count as non-recurring? Because that's also concerning. Like, would people just be stuck with no financial help from the government? I'm just thinking out loud here, but for there to not be flexibility to take care of the people in the state, it just is so irresponsible, in my opinion. I think that's that on the growth limit. I hope that makes sense. Okay, I want to read this too. This is about the teachers. Specifically, public school teachers in Louisiana are underpaid. With Amendment 2, they would still be getting the same pay they currently receive. The money would just come from a different pot. Amendment 2 would eliminate 3 state trust funds that were created by voters. Currently, the interest from these funds is spent in support of education programs from pre-K through college. The state trust funds that were created by voters, and the money has supported education programs, also infrastructure and other things, but we're talking specifically the education programs. That's important, right? Removing these trust funds that voters created that fund education. Important to just make that clear. The amendment would eliminate the Louisiana Quality Education Trust Fund, the Louisiana Education Quality Support Fund, and the Education Excellence Fund. Each year, the investment earnings of these funds are distributed to provide services at all education levels in the state. In the current fiscal year, $64 million of these funds' investment earnings were appropriated to such programs. So that's a lot of money in the current year. That's a lot of money that goes to really important education programs. I'm sure everyone would agree, like, education programs are important to fund, right? The 3 trust funds hold approximately $2 billion, which would be used for a one-time payment to the Teachers Retirement System of Louisiana to be applied to retirement system debt. The debt is currently paid through regular employer contributions by all employers who participate in TRSL. Prepaying that debt will reduce the costs that local school systems have to pay for retirement, which frees up money that local school districts are expected to use to provide a $2,000 pay raise for teachers and a $1,000 raise for school support personnel. So just to reiterate that last sentence, because that's the really important part of it. The 3 trust funds, the money from that would go into the retirement system, which would free up the local schools. The local schools wouldn't have to pay into it as much, right? So that money, the extra money that they're getting from not having to pay, they are expected to give to their teachers. They're expected. This isn't a requirement. So again, this isn't a guaranteed pay raise. There's other elements of this too, because the teachers are actually not going to get the bonus that they've been getting for the past 2 years. The teachers and school support staff, they've been already getting a bonus, but even beyond that, it is not a guaranteed pay raise. It's just expected. It's just expected that every district is paying their teachers. That's just expected. It's not guaranteed. That's just very, very important. In reality, the pay raises from local school boards will simply replace annual stipends that teachers have received from the state the past 2 years. In both the 2023 and 2024 legislative sessions, teachers and support staff received $2,000 and $1,000 pay stipends, respectively. There is no guarantee that this would be a permanent salary increase at all. It's not in the language. And I also just want to read this bottom part, because this is another thing that clicked for me about the growth limit, is this part of this little excerpt. Lawmakers can and should give all public school teachers a permanent pay raise through the minimum foundation program, the state's K-12 education funding formula. Doing so would require lawmakers to make a reoccurring investment in public education, the kind of investment that would be more difficult if the growth limit were proposed elsewhere and this amendment were to take effect. So just another bad thing about this amendment, teachers should get a permanent pay raise. That could happen through the formula that already exists. But if this amendment were to pass, not only would all this other pay raise nonsense be happening that is not actually pay raise, but it would be much more difficult for legislatures to make reoccurring investments into public schools, which would give teachers a permanent raise. So it's just silly. It's just silly. I'm not going to read. There is a lot on the and other modifications and what that actually is. It's a lot of things, but I just want to say, similarly to the First Amendment where you're voting on two different things, passing two different things. It's similar in this amendment, and actually in Amendment 2 it's way more things. It is irresponsible for voters to be asked to vote for that many things within 115 pages within 91 words. Like, that is just irresponsible. Even if these were great things and I loved everything in them, it's not, we can't just boil this all down into and other modifications. Like, that's just crazy. Yeah, so that's Amendment 2. That one was the one that I was dreading just because it is the most, I feel like, complicated, and I don't, it's was the hardest one for me to really understand. But really shout out to Invest in Louisiana. They have done so much amazing work on this amendment specifically. And like I said, they've done amazing work in general, but they've been so helpful in helping me understand what all this is when it's been very difficult. So shout out to them. And again, I'm going to keep saying it. If you want to read any of this for yourself, please it will be in the description. Please just read it. Feel free and have a great time. Okay, y'all. Amendment 3 is the most straightforward crazy. I'm spooked by Amendment 3. Let me get to it so I can read it. Okay, so this is the language on the ballot. It says, do you support an amendment to provide the legislature the authority to determine which felony crimes, when committed by a person under the age of 17, may be transferred for criminal prosecution as an adult? So, just sending kids to prison. It's not funny. It's actually not funny, but it's laughable. It's not funny, but it's laughable. So we're just sending kids to prison, and that is what we're doing. Okay, great. It's not funny, but gosh, that's insane. I mean, that is the most insane crazy. I told you, that's the most wild one. And they're all so bad. So to have one that's this shocking, it's shocking. There's so much to talk about in regards to this one. I think obviously most simply, vote no. We don't need 10-year-olds in prison. I'm very sorry to say that. It's just really not what we need. It's just simply not what we need. But I think in the future I'll just have a guest on, or I'm sure multiple, to talk about juvenile justice and criminal justice in general, because it's such a huge conversation, especially in the state of Louisiana, where we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, I think. In the country, but I think maybe in the world. But to talk, I guess, specifically about this amendment and why it's such a problem, I know a lot of it is very obvious, but some of the really scary things about it are, I mean, first of all, already you can try kids as adults, I think as young as 14, at least in Louisiana. I don't know if this is nationwide, but as young as 14, that already can happen for very severe crimes, but this would remove that bottom limit. So, if you're 11, 10, whatever, that already is a lot. That already is crazy. But the scarier part, to me at least, is the fact that it extends the lists of crimes that you can be tried for life for. It extends that list and includes non-violent offenses. That, to me, is the scariest, craziest things, that you can have a 12-year-old commit a non-violent offense and go to prison for life as an adult with adults. So I want to read some of these bullet points for Voice of the Experience about Amendment 3, and then we can get further in, because I could probably just rant about this for a long time, because again, it's just so cruel. But I want to just read this first. So it expands mass incarceration, of course. It expands adult prosecution beyond serious crimes. Louisiana already allows 15, 16, and in some cases 14-year-olds to be charged as adults for certain violent or repeat drug offenses. This amendment would give legislators the power to add any felony to that list with just a 2/3 vote. So anything could potentially be added to the list of, you can be tried an adult for this no matter the age. Anything could be added to this list. Yeah, I'm spooked. Adults who might just have served 5 years in the juvenile system could now face decades behind bars. I mean, that's one of the scariest things. Sentence length and also the lack of rehabilitation and the fact that like some random teenage or preteen mistake, again, any felony, could lead to lifelong, even if not lifelong, 10 years in adult prison, that affects your life, right? The fact that you can make one mistake as a kid and that's it. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Like, it's just so cruel and so dehumanizing. I can't think of words other than that to use because that's just how it feels. There are so many things we can do about crime, juvenile crime. There are things we can do to be proactive and preventative. This is just not one of them. This is just wanting to put more and more and more people in the system. So you lower the age and lower the age and lower the age, and extend the list of crimes and extend the sentencing time and all these different things just to keep people locked up. Like, that's all that it is. And that is not helpful for anybody. It doesn't reduce crime for anyone. It is not, I don't know how any person would look at this and think that. I just don't understand it. Yeah, so that's Amendment 3. Thank you for joining me on that one. That's a fun one. Okay, so for Amendment number 4, a lot of people do talk about this alongside with number 1 because it is also about the court system and about judges, but I'm just going to talk about it last because I want it to be in order. So I will read the language of Amendment 4. No. Do you support an amendment to provide for the use of the earliest election date to fill judicial vacancies? So essentially this one, from what I understand and what I've heard and read about, it is kind of just more meddling in the way that our election process kind of works in regards to courts. So like the creating of specialty courts where potentially people appointed could be making decisions for people that are not in that district or didn't vote for them or whatever, right? For anything that they want with no accountability. This is sort of similar where it's not fixing a problem. You're just changing the date when we can vote for judges to potentially fill vacancies on low turnout elections like on March 29th, which, the lower turnout election, the better someone can meddle in that election, right? When there's not a lot of people voting, people in power can get what they want a lot more easily. It just further complicates the system. And like I was saying earlier, this is already a much too complicated system. There's no reason to change it. Nothing is broken the system is broken, but this part of it isn't. There's no problem there, right? There's no reason to change it. So that is kind of the concern with Amendment 4. Okay. The move in Amendment 4, this is from the notothemall.org. Say no to them all, y'all website. The move in Amendment 4 to change the election dates for judges is another ploy to make it easier for politicians to get their friends elected when few voters are paying attention. Right. So it's kind of what I was saying earlier. It complicates the system, makes it easier for people already in power to decide who gets to be in power, who gets to stay in power, what judges get to serve and where, So it just makes it more complicated and again, makes it more difficult for us to be engaged citizens, which I don't like and I don't support. So I'll be voting no on number 4 along with all of the others. I really appreciate all of you for listening to this episode or watching if you're joining me on YouTube. Thank you for watching. I'm not, again, I'll say it again. I know I'm not an expert on this. I hope you still learned something or at least were inspired to read some of the information I provided in the description or Google it on your own and look it up. I'm really happy I was able to record this episode because like I said, I do think it's really important and I think it's important for all of us to care and also to get more comfortable speaking about this stuff, learning about this stuff, taking the time to, really sit with it and be more grounded in our community and where we're from and, what power we have. I think that's important. So I hope that you've been inspired to, one, go vote. Early voting starts tomorrow on Saturday, March 15th and goes until the 22nd. And then election day is on the 29th. Download your Go Vote app, y'all. If y'all need that, download it so you can see all your stuff on there, okay? Make sure you have a plan for voting. Go vote. I, of course, am voting no on all four. I hope everyone votes no on all four. It's really, really important. Also, if you like these solo episodes of me just chatting, then please let me know. Maybe I'll do more of them. They do make me a little bit more, I feel a little bit more out of my depth and out of my element than when I have a guest on. But that's okay. That's okay. We do have some really, really, really exciting guests on for the next few weeks. I'm just very happy and grateful for all of my guests that have either already been on or have agreed to be on, and also anyone that watches. Thank you for watching. Well, I think that's it, everybody. Please go vote. If you're in Louisiana, even if you're not, vote. But if you're in Louisiana, please go vote in this upcoming election. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, please comment down below and we can chat. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.